The sun over Naval Base San Diego was a brutal white gold coin hammering down on the parade ground. It wasn't just heat, it was a physical weight that pressed against the 5,000 enlisted sailors and officers standing in immaculate formation. The air shimmered above the asphalt, and the only sounds were the occasional rustle of a uniform and the distant, mournful cry of gulls. Today was a culmination, a full-dress rehearsal for a change of command ceremony, and a ballet of precision that the Navy prided itself on. At the heart of this rigid masculine world stood Admiral Marcus Thorne. Admiral Thorne was a man carved from the very concept of authority. A full admiral with 4 stars gleaming on his collar, he had a chest laden with decorations earned over 3 decades of service. He was a product of the old school, a man who believed in order, in the stark, unforgiving lines of the chain of command. He commanded respect, or more accurately, he demanded it. To him, the 5,000 sailors standing at attention weren't individuals. They were components of a vast machine he was tasked with perfecting. His face, tanned and deeply lined, was set in a perpetual expression of stern judgment. The rehearsal was running long. The sun was reaching its peak, and tempers were fraying under the starched collars. A young lieutenant, the adjutant for the ceremony, was having trouble with the coordination of the unit flags. And from Admiral Thorne's perspective, it was a cascading failure. The flags were a few degrees off their marks, causing a ripple effect of misalignment down the line. It was unacceptable. He saw it not as a minor error in a rehearsal, but as a symptom of a deeper, more profound lack of discipline, a sloppiness that he would not tolerate. He scanned the ranks of senior officers standing on the periphery, looking for the officer responsible for this unit's ceremonial preparation. His eyes landed on a figure standing slightly apart from the group of commanders and captains. It was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, wearing the service dress blues of a lieutenant. She was holding a tablet, seemingly reviewing a checklist, and appeared to be murmuring instructions into a small, discreet earpiece. To Admiral Thorne, she looked like an administrative assistant, or perhaps a public affairs officer who had wandered into the wrong place. Her focus was on the tablet, but not on the Admiral. "You there!" Thorne's voice cut through the heavy air like a cleaver. It wasn't loud, but it carried the absolute authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed instantly. Several officers flinched. The young woman looked up from her tablet, her expression one of calm inquiry. "Yes, Admiral?" she replied. Her voice was steady, respectful, but there was no tremor of fear in it. This, in itself, was a small rebellion to a man like Thorne. He strode towards her, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel. The 5,000 sailors, sensing the tension, remained frozen, but their eyes were locked on the scene. The silence became deafening. "Are you the flag officer for this unit?" he demanded, his tone dripping with contempt. He didn't ask for her name or her role. He simply assumed her insignificance. "No, sir. I'm with the ceremonial support staff, overseeing the logistical flow," she explained calmly, gesturing with her tablet. The flag coordination is being handled by Commander Ellis, who is currently over by the color guard." Thorne didn't look at where she was pointing. He saw her explanation not as information, but as backtalk. He saw her calm demeanor as insolence. In his world, a junior officer's response to an admiral's question should be a crisp "yes, sir" or "no, sir," followed by immediate, unquestioning action. Her detailed answer, her lack of visible anxiety, was an affront to his authority. "I don't care what your petty title is," he snarled, stepping closer, using his height and rank to physically intimidate her. "I see a junior officer standing idle while my ceremony falls apart. You are a disgrace to that uniform. You're a spoiled child playing dress-up while real men are working." The insult was deliberate, designed to humiliate. He wanted to see her crumble, to see the fear ignite in her eyes. He expected tears or a stammered apology. He saw none of that. And the lieutenant simply looked at him, Her gaze was unnervingly direct, a clear, unwavering blue that held no fear, only a profound and unsettling patience. It was the look of someone who had stared down threats far more lethal than an angry man with stars on his collar. This infuriated him further. The lack of the expected reaction was the ultimate provocation. "What's your name?" he demanded, pulling out the figurative knife. "Lieutenant Junior Grade Evelyn Reed, sir," she stated clearly. Amy scoffed, making sure his voice carried. "Reed, probably some general's daughter who got a commission through a connections program, given everything she never earned." He turned slightly as if to address the thousands of silent witnesses. "This is what's wrong with the service today. Spoiled, entitled brats who don't know the meaning of sacrifice or discipline." He turned back to her, his face red with rage. He was performing now, using her as a prop to demonstrate his power to the troops. "You have no place on my parade ground. You are an insult." In a fit of uncontrolled, performative fury, he did the unthinkable. His right hand, calloused from years of sailing and combat, swung in a short, vicious arc. The sound of his open palm connecting with her cheek was not a loud crack, but a sickening, wet thump that echoed in the stunned silence. The force of the blow snapped her head to the side. A sharp intake of breath swept through the 5,000-strong formation like a wave. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. You could have heard a pin drop in the vacuum that followed. An admiral, an officer of the highest rank, had just physically struck a junior officer on a parade ground in front of thousands. Lieutenant Reed didn't stumble. She didn't fall. She didn't even raise a hand to her reddening cheek. She slowly, deliberately, turned her head back to face him. The calm in her eyes was gone, replaced by something ancient and chilling. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was a deep, glacial disappointment, the kind a master might show a student who had failed a simple, fundamental test. She reached up and pulled the small earpiece from her ear. A tiny, almost imperceptible voice could be heard buzzing from it before she silenced it. "Admiral Thorne," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying perfectly in the absolute stillness. You should not have done that." Before Thorne could unleash another tirade, a sound intruded. It was the distinct, powerful whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of an approaching helicopter. A sleek black MH-60R Seahawk, devoid of any unit markings, swooped low over the parade ground, its rotors kicking up a tremendous cloud of dust and sand. It was an unauthorized breach of airspace and a blatant disruption of a naval ceremony. Thorne spun around, furious at this new violation of his zhu-shu. The helicopter touched down on the edge of the parade ground, a dark scar on the pristine asphalt. The side door slid open, and 4 men in civilian attire jumped out. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that immediately marked them as military, despite their lack of uniforms. They walked with purpose, cutting directly across the parade ground, ignoring the stunned admiral and the frozen formations. They stopped in front of Lieutenant Reed, the lead man, a large individual with close-cropped gray hair and a face like a granite cliff, looked from the red mark on her face to Admiral Thorne, then back to her. "Lieutenant Reed," the man said, his voice a low rumble. "Admiral Harrison sends his regards. There's been a change of plans. The situation in the South China Sea has escalated. DEVGRU is wheels up in 90. You're needed, now." The word DEVGRU hung in the air like a grenade pin. Every senior officer within earshot went rigid. DEVGRU, the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, better known to the world as SEAL Team 6, the absolute tip of the spear, the most elite counterterrorism unit on the planet. They were ghosts, legends. And this young woman, this spoiled child Admiral Thorne had just slapped, was being summoned by name. Lieutenant Reed, or rather Operator Evelyn Reed of the United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group, nodded once. She turned her calm, piercing gaze back to Admiral Thorne. And the 4 men from the helicopter flanked her, their postures subtly shifting from respectful subordinates to a protective detail. They looked at the Admiral now, not with the deference due his rank, but with the cold, appraising assessment of hunters sizing up a potential threat. The silence that followed was more profound than before. The 5,000 sailors were no longer just watching. They were witnessing a tectonic shift in reality. The man who, moments ago, I was the absolute monarch of this domain, now seemed smaller, diminished. His act of violence was no longer a display of authority. It was a pathetic, cowardly assault on a national asset. Reed took a single step closer to him. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence, it was perfectly audible to him and the men surrounding them. Admiral Thorne, my name is Evelyn Reed. I have over 200 confirmed operational hours in denied territory. I have been shot at, blown up, and have killed more men than you have commanded ships. I don't say that to impress you. I say it so you understand the magnitude of your error. She touched her cheek, the skin now an angry red. This is not an injury sustained in the line of duty. This is a personal assault. She let the words sink in. Admiral Thorne's face had gone from red to a pasty, sickly gray. The realization of what he had done was a physical blow, winding him. He hadn't just struck a junior officer, and he had assaulted a Tier 1 operator. The political and career-ending ramifications exploded in his mind like a series of depth charges. You have a ceremony to run, Reed continued, her tone now devoid of all emotion, as if she were discussing a logistics report. And I have a war to get to. So, if you'll excuse me. She didn't salute. She didn't ask for permission. She simply turned her back on a 4-star admiral, a move that was technically a court-martial offense. See, but no one in that parade ground, least of all Admiral Thorne, saw it as an act of insubordination. They saw it for what it was, a warrior dismissing an irrelevance. She walked towards the waiting helicopter, her steps measured and steady. The 4 men fell in around her, a mobile fortress of flesh and bone. As the helicopter's rotors began to spin faster, the man with the gray hair paused, looking back at Thorne. "Sir," he said, the word dripping with a contempt so profound it was almost a physical substance. "I'd recommend you get your story straight. The Admiral's staff will be in touch with the CNO within the hour." He turned and jogged to the helicopter, pulling the door shut behind him. The Seahawk lifted off, tilting sharply and racing towards the horizon, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Admiral Thorne was left standing alone on his parade ground, the focus of 5,000 pairs of eyes. But the ceremony was forgotten. The flags were forgotten. All that remained was the image of a man who had just destroyed his own legacy in a single foolish moment of rage. He had sought to humble a spoiled child, and had instead been publicly, irrevocably humbled by a true American hero. The sun continued to beat down, but for Admiral Marcus Thorne, the world had gone cold and dark. The only thing left was the long, humiliating walk back to his office, and the even longer fall from grace that was about to begin.